The Milwaukee Monster, the dark story of Jeffrey Dahmer. Have you ever wondered how someone seemingly normal could hide such dark secrets that challenge our understanding of human nature? Imagine an ordinary city where neighbors greet each other every morning, children play on sidewalks, and no one suspects that behind the door of apartment 213 there exists a universe of indescribable horror. Today, we're going to explore the disturbed mind of one of America's most notorious serial killers, Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. Before we continue, if you appreciate in-depth investigative content about criminal cases that challenge our understanding, activate the bell icon now, subscribe to the channel, and leave your like to support this intense research work. Every like helps us bring more stories like this to you. What makes this case particularly fascinating and disturbing isn't just the heinous nature of the crimes, but how an ordinary boy transformed into a monster capable of murdering 17 people, and how he managed to do it for so long without being discovered. Warning: this video contains descriptions of real and disturbing crimes. Proceed with discretion. The seemingly normal childhood. Born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer appeared to be a perfectly ordinary child in the eyes of his neighbors and classmates. According to accounts from people who knew him during this time, Jeffrey was described as a shy but sociable boy, intelligent and participative in classes, a tennis player, a member of the school band, playing the clarinet, a son from a middle-class family. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, forensic psychologist and expert on serial killers, states, "Often, we look for obvious signs in the childhood of violent criminals, but the truth is that the indicators can be subtle or even invisible to outsiders. However, behind this facade of normality, there were more discreet signs that something wasn't right." The breaking point. Jeffrey's life began to fall apart when his parents started a traumatic divorce process. What differentiates this case from thousands of other children who go through divorces is what came afterward. In one of the most impactful episodes of this story, his mother simply abandoned the family home, leaving Jeffrey completely alone, without adequate food, supervision, or emotional support at a critical moment in his development. Dr. Helen Morrison, a forensic psychiatrist who has interviewed several serial killers, explains, "Abandonment during adolescence can create deep psychological wounds, especially when accompanied by a sense of absolute rejection. When his father finally discovered the situation and returned to take care of him, the psychological damage had already been done. Classmates who had previously described him as cheerful and energetic began to notice a dramatic change in his behavior. He became reclusive. He developed very few social connections. He began abusing alcohol even in his adolescence. It's important to clarify, family trauma does not justify nor completely explain the horrors that came afterward. Millions of people go through severe trauma without becoming predators. However, these events seem to have been catalysts for something much darker that already existed within him. Disturbing signs. During high school, Jeffrey developed increasingly disturbing behaviors, which we now recognize as part of the sociopathy triad. 1. Seeking attention through bizarre behaviors. Jeffrey began faking epileptic seizures in the middle of school. When asked why he did this, he would respond that it was just to see how people would react. 2. Fascination with death and decomposition. He developed a morbid interest in dead animals, collecting carcasses from roadsides and meticulously dissecting them in his backyard. 3. Creation of macabre rituals. Jeffrey built an animal cemetery, where he performed strange ceremonies with the remains he collected. Criminologist Anne Rule, who extensively studied the case, comments, "These are classic signs of a developing psychopathic personality. The problem is that they are rarely recognized in time." Thakur, the first murder. In June 1978, shortly after his high school graduation, Jeffrey Dahmer committed his first murder. Driving down the road, he spotted a 19-year-old named Stephen Hicks walking by the roadside. Jeffrey offered him a ride, inviting him for drinks at his house. What happened next marks the beginning of one of the most disturbing criminal careers in American history. When Stephen expressed a desire to leave, Jeffrey attacked him with a barbell, strangling him to death. This wasn't a normal impulsive crime. What came afterward revealed Jeffrey's true nature. He meticulously dismembered the body, removed the flesh from the bones using acid, pulverized the bones with a sledgehammer, scattered the remains throughout the yard, incorporating them into his cemetery. Criminal behavior expert Robert Ressler, who coined the term serial killer, explains, "The level of planning and the familiarity with which Dahmer handled the body in his first murder suggests that he had fantasized and mentally prepared for this moment for a long time." The transition. Years after Hicks's murder, Jeffrey tried to lead a normal life. He enrolled in university at his father's insistence but quickly abandoned his studies and dove deeply into alcoholism. Concerned about his son's erratic behavior, his father sent him to serve in the German army, hoping that military discipline might straighten him out. This was just another failed attempt at salvation. Jeffrey was discharged from the army for chronic alcoholism. There were accusations that he had abused other soldiers. His behavior became increasingly erratic. Upon returning to the United States, Jeffrey moved to Miami, where his downward spiral continued. He accumulated various arrests for public intoxication. He was arrested for indecent exposure. He began living in increasingly precarious conditions. Psychologist Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, an expert in traumatic memory, observes, "During this period, we see Dahmer using alcohol as self-medication, possibly to suppress impulses and fantasies that he himself recognized as disturbing." The escalation of horrors. In 1987, 9 years after his first murder, Jeffrey's homicidal impulses resurfaced with devastating intensity. Living with his grandmother in Milwaukee, he managed to get a night job at a local chocolate factory. This job provided Jeffrey with the perfect cover for his nocturnal activities. He visited gay bars in the vicinity after his shift, which ended at midnight. Criminologist Dr. Scott Bond explains, Dahmer specifically selected marginalized men, often racial minorities, sex workers, or LGBTQ+ individuals, knowing that their disappearance would generate less attention from authorities. This is not a coincidence, but a calculated strategy. His method evolved into a terrible pattern. He lured men to his home, offering money for photos or companionship, drugged their drinks with sleeping pills, strangled his victims while unconscious, performed acts of necrophilia with the bodies, methodically dismembered the corpses, preserved specific parts as trophies, frequently practiced cannibalism, consuming parts of the victims. In an interview after his capture, Dahmer explained his behavior in a chilling way. "I wanted to create zombies that could stay with me forever, that couldn't leave." The zombie experiment. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Dahmer case was his attempt to create living zombies. At his most extreme level of depravity, Jeffrey began performing improvised lobotomies on some victims. Using a drill, he would open holes in the skulls of sedated victims and inject hydrochloric acid directly into their brains. The goal? To create a submissive sex slave who would remain alive, but without their own will. Neuropsychiatrist Dr. Dorothy Lewis comments, "This behavior reveals a level of dissociation from reality that goes beyond what we see in most cases of psychopathy." Dahmer was living in a completely parallel reality disconnected from any human empathy. Miraculously, one of the victims of this macabre experiment, Konarak Synthasamphone, a 14-year-old boy, managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment while he was away. Disoriented and unable to speak coherently due to brain damage, Konarak was found by 3 women who immediately called the police. What happened next is one of the greatest failures of the American justice system. The systemic failure. When the police arrived, they found Dahmer already back at the scene. With calculated coldness, he convinced the officers that Konarak was his intoxicated adult boyfriend, merely having a domestic dispute. Despite the protests of the women who found the boy, the officers handed young Konarak back to his torturer, who murdered him minutes after the police left. Former detective Pat Kennedy, who worked on the case, reflects, "This wasn't just an error in judgment. It was a systemic failure to protect the most vulnerable. Structural racism and homophobia certainly influenced the officer's decision to believe Dahmer, a white man, instead of the black women who tried to help." Later, it was discovered that there were decomposing corpses in the apartment at the time the police were there. The odor was so strong that it's almost incomprehensible how they didn't notice. The capture. In July 1991, Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old man, was invited to Dahmer's apartment. Unlike the other victims, Edwards immediately noticed signs of danger. A penetrating, putrid odor in the apartment, Dahmer's erratic and threatening behavior, a blue drum from which the smell of decomposition emanated. When Dahmer tried to handcuff him and threatened him with a knife, Edwards managed to gain his trust momentarily, pretending to be calm and cooperative. In a moment of distraction, he punched Dahmer and escaped to the street, still with a handcuff attached to his wrist. Edwards found 2 police officers and led them back to apartment 213. What the police found was a scene straight out of the deepest nightmares. 7 meticulously preserved human skulls, hearts, muscles, and organs stored in the refrigerator, Polaroid photographs of victims in various stages of dismemberment, a macabre altar made of painted skulls, chemicals for dissolving bodies, evidence of recent cannibalism. Detective Murphy, the first officer to investigate the scene, later reported, "In 33 years of police service, I've never seen anything like it. It was like entering another world, a world of pure evil." The psychology of the monster. Dahmer confessed to 17 murders when he was arrested, detailing each one with disturbing precision. During his trial, forensic psychology experts tried to understand what had created Jeffrey Dahmer. Dr. Carl Wallstrom, a psychiatrist who examined Dahmer, stated, "He suffered from borderline, schizoid, and psychopathic personality disorders, a perfect storm of pathologies that, combined with his paraphilic fantasies, created a unique predator." Dr. Park Dietz, another forensic psychiatrist, offered a different view. Dahmer perfectly understood what he was doing. He chose to act according to his fantasies. It's not just about mental illness, but about terrible moral choices. Dahmer himself offered a disturbing perspective on his motives. It wasn't hatred. It was a desire for complete control over someone, to completely possess another person. This statement reveals much about the nature of his crimes. For Dahmer, his victims weren't people. They were objects to be possessed, consumed, and incorporated into his own identity. Justice and consequences. In February 1992, after a trial that captured worldwide attention, Jeffrey Dahmer was found sane and sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, a total of 957 years. During his time in prison, Dahmer became a born-again Christian, according to his own testimony, expressed remorse for his crimes, gave interviews trying to explain his motives. However, many experts question the sincerity of his supposed redemption. In November 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death by another inmate, Christopher Scarver, who later claimed that Dahmer provoked other prisoners by making sculptures of human limbs with prison food. Reflections and legacy. The Dahmer case raises profound questions about our society. Institutional failures. How could a man already convicted of abusing a minor and with multiple previous arrests continue killing for so long? Systemic prejudice. How many lives could have been saved if authorities had taken seriously the reports from people of color and the LGBTQ+ community about disappearances? Ignored signs. Dahmer's neighbors had repeatedly complained about strange odors and disturbing sounds coming from his apartment. Why were these complaints ignored? Journalist Ann Masters, who extensively covered the case, observes, "The Dahmer case isn't just about a monstrous man, but about a society that repeatedly failed to protect its most vulnerable populations. Impactful conclusion. Jeffrey Dahmer represents one of the most disturbing examples of how human evil can hide in plain sight. An ordinary man, working in a chocolate factory, living in a normal apartment, but hiding unimaginable horrors behind his door. His case forces us to question how many other Dahmers might be among us, hidden in the shadows of apparent normality. As a society, we must learn from these catastrophic errors of the past. We need to listen when marginalized communities report disappearances. We need to investigate signs of disturbing behavior. And above all, we need to recognize that evil rarely announces itself. It often wears the mask of everyday normality. Did this case impact you? Do you have theories about the psychology of serial killers or other cases you'd like us to explore? Leave your reflections in the comments below. Share this video with friends interested in criminology. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive our upcoming videos about the most mysterious criminal cases in history. Thank you for watching. Until the next case.